Zaldrizes buzdaris kosdaor.
You have to have both. Technical knowledge can be learned. Creativity can't.
Isnata Jahash. Shihochausich.
So how do you create a language?
Oh, that is a really big question that we could answer in 3 hours, but to try to sum it up in a 30-second spiel. The way we do it is we start at the smallest unit, and so we start with the sounds, picking out what sounds will be in the language. And we build up from there, making, what will the syllable structures be? How will those sounds come together into little packages that will eventually become words? And then how are those words going to come together to create phrases and clauses? And so that's the very shorthand version, step by step.
So if we took English for an example, just because we're in the United States, I think of like very common language. Like, what is English kind of built upon that would be an example of how you then build a con language up?
English is just like any other spoken language. It has a phonology. What a phonology stands for is a sound system. A sound system comprises individual sounds that can be manipulated to create differences in meaning. For example, in English, pack and back could be different words, right? In another language, say in Hindi, pack, back, and back could all be different words. They can't be in English. In English, those distinctions are considered too subtle to make meaning distinctions. Not in Hindi. But so be it. That's just a way that the two languages are different. And so all languages have this set of sounds that are considered to be important for making meaning distinctions. And when you create a language, you create those sounds. You also create the rules by which those sounds can be put together. So, for example, the sounds that are found in Hawaiian, almost all of them are found in English as well. However, we know that a word like clomp is an English word. Every single one of those sounds is found in Hawaiian. That is the K, the L, the A vowel, the M, and the P. All of those sounds are in Hawaiian. But it could never be a Hawaiian word, because Hawaiian doesn't allow for any syllable to end with a consonant, let alone two of them as an MP. And it doesn't allow any syllable to begin with more than one consonant, say a K and an L. This is why when something like Christmas gets borrowed into Hawaiian, it comes out as kalikimaka, because they have to kind of force it into that framework. So when you are defining the sound system of a language, you're choosing the sounds and also defining the framework.
You kind of start out with the basic sounds of it. How long does it take to where you're getting the words, you're getting the sentences, you're getting the paragraphs, etc., etc.?
It takes a very long time. And so something as small as like, I see a cat, a nice short sentence, lovely, small, most likely all those words are going to be basic in whatever language we're dealing with, as long as they have cats in their area. And yet, there's so many decisions you have to make that a sentence that small could end up taking days of work to translate. We got to decide, what are the pronouns going to do? I? How are those pronouns going to be shaped up? Are they going to be marked with cases? For that matter, is a cat going to be marked with a case? For that matter, is the verb to see going to work differently than to take or to grab or to, hold something much more tangible and like active? Are those verbs going to work different? What are you going to do with tenses? And so it's all of these little decisions for something as simple as I see a cat takes hours and hours.
I don't know if this is the best analogy to make it, but it sounds like it's kind of like you're the domino surrounded by all other dominoes. And if you hit one, it goes throughout the entire rest of the language as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I never thought of it that way. Makes creating a language sound like more of a catastrophe. I like the idea.
On the kind of the devil's advocate side, right? Like, why not just make it up? Like, could you just make up gibberish?
You could make up gibberish, but then it would be gibberish, not a language. Yeah.
That is a good answer. Like, oh, you win this round, sir. Right? Like,
I will also say too on the gibberish note that humans are really, really bad at just spontaneously creating gibberish that won't start repeating. It's just like at some point, you're just going to start using those same elements over and over and over again because that's your brain's been primed and it's like, gosh, I can't think of a new sound to save my life. And so, your string of gibberish that's supposed to represent this whole clause only has like five different sounds in it and like the same syllable over and over again. And so if you see a show or a movie that has used gibberish, and there are some out there, you may notice that really all they say is something similar to oinga boinga hunga, and it's translated as something really complex, and then you hear the next sentence and oinga is used again, but in a completely different way, and it's so silly. It comes out gibberish is so silly when we try to do it.
do you feel like there's been a big buy-in amongst producers in this recently?
In general, I would say it's an upward trend, but only with those that get it, with those who care. And often when it happens, it draws attention, which means that you're more likely to, it's more likely to be discussed, more likely to be noticed than not.
So when you look at the process, right? Like, do they give you the lines of dialogue that they want you to create the language for ahead of time, or do you create the language and then match it to what they want to say?
There's Well, I mean, like, there's no matching. It's all about translation at that point. And so, no matter what lines they give us, whether ahead of time or after we've already created a bit of the language, there's still that process of breaking it down to, like, what does the line mean? Because we never do like a word for word translation. You break it down to say, well, what's the meaning of the line and how would they express it in this language? And so it doesn't change our process to have the lines ahead of time or after the fact. We prefer to have them ahead of a time just because that gives us a better idea of the content and the vocabulary that's going to be spoken about most by these people. And that really helps us develop the vocabulary in a way that we're generating words that will actually be used in translations. When we create a language and have no lines that we know that we need, at that point, you're just making words that may or may not be useful for the translation process that may never show up on screen. And so, for any project we've worked on, we have so many words that are part of the language that no one will ever know about because they never made it on screen.
Like, when you're creating a language, how do you decide on what the tone of that language is going to be? And the example that I would be most familiar with is like the difference between Dothraki and Valyrian.
Gaumaus ne hurtami repagona epeopolis. Lokoston kodabri predagon.
Right, where one sounds a certain way and indicates a certain kind of people, and another sounds a different way and indicates kind of a different mindset, so to speak. How do you decide what the tone of the language is going to be?
It's a perception, but it's not accurate, I would say. There's nothing about the sound of Dothraki that indicates anything about the speakers. It's just a language. It matches the phonology that George R. R. Martin came up with, that he put in the book as I analyzed it. Same is true for High Valyrian. I mean, there's really nothing about it that says anything one way or the other. You can take the same sentence and translate it into both languages. And you can, once that's translated, you can say that sentence and you can shout it, you can whisper it, you can say it, in somebody's ear like you're trying to seduce them. Doesn't make a difference. All of this stuff, it has nothing to do with the language. It has to do with delivery. It has to do with who's saying it and how. Also, what they're saying and why. And so really, if you look at the Dothraki, it has nothing to do with their language. It has to do with the situations that they've been put in and what they're saying. For example, I would ask you, how would you define English? Is English a harsh language? Is English a mellifluous language? Is it a beautiful language? Is it a capitalist language? What is it?
I guess I would say, like, kind of to your point, it's all of the above. It just depends on how the person decides to use it at that time.
Yeah.
So they, like, even a producer wouldn't come forward and say, we want this language to sound this way.
Oh, all the time.
How do you kind of, with what you said before, like, how do you kind of reconcile those two things that, like,
We tell them what they want to hear, and then we do what we're going to do.
that's the way to do it, really, right? Like, that's the only way to kind of do it in some regards. Yeah. I was going to ask you other stuff, but these are kind of summed up. Are you ready for some harder/listener submitted questions?
Oh, yeah.
Think so.
What is your favorite language that you've created?
It keeps changing. Most recently, I said Erathiant for defiance for one of the languages that I created for myself, and then a language that we created together was Nulisu, which is a language for anthropomorphic beavers that the two of us created for our YouTube series, Langtime Studio.
I loved it. I was not anticipating that was what that was going to be created for, and for some reason I was like, oh, I want to hear more of this language.
Can you say anything in it, David?
So, Sale matimo kasba sabibna. I'm sorry. Sale matimo kasba sabibna. There we go. The beaver carries the stick to the rock.
Jessie, are those your favorites as well?
Like David, my answers regularly change, just depending on what I'm in the mood for in that particular time. Because like languages are, it's so impossible to choose favorites among them. It's like asking, what's your favorite word? And some days you're like, this is it. And other days you're like, I don't know. I like, like these 20 words a lot. And then you start listing words you like, and suddenly you have, 500 favorite words, and it's no longer a favorite. Like David and his favorite music albums. And so usually though, like the some of the languages that are nearest and dearest to my heart in terms of what we've done together, I would probably put Minishe at the top just because it was the first language David and I ever created together. It was a language used for Freeform's motherland, Fort Salem, for these witches and their witch community. And so that one is very near and dear to my heart, not for any sort of linguistic reason, but just for, remembering the process and the nostalgia of it all. Um, and in terms of favorite language I've created on my own, I would probably put Jwari at the top of that list. It's a personal language that I created and have been working on actively for, well, I guess about 5 years now, and so it's one of my favorites.
How do you create words that aren't already in existence, right? Like, I would think that between all the languages of all the things that people have said, like, how do you come up with something like nobody's ever said that before? Is it hard, or is it actually that's really easy?
It's not even a concern. I mean, natural languages do this all the time. They have lots of words where it's like, you say this in this language. You also say it the same way in another language, and these two things are totally unrelated. Just happens.
And so yeah, we call that skluing because it's like it happens, and that happens in natural languages. Like you can look across the board and you can find examples, and the only one coming up out the top of my head, David, maybe you can help me out here, but
Hmm.
literally the only one on the top of my head is pupu in Finnish, means bunny. And it's like, that sure sounds like an English word, doesn't it? But it's, totally different. But you see these words all the time where it's like, that 100% sounds like an English word, but it means something different. Or 100% sounds like this English word in an accent, and they kind of mean the same thing. And so you look up their etymologies to see if they're related and find out they're not, that it's all just like accidental, and it's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. Another good pair is mata. In ancient Greek means I. It also means I in Proto-Austronesian, reconstructed. The two languages are completely unrelated. Same word, same sound, same meaning, total accident.
Hardest language to create that you've done? Like, oh, that one was really took me a while.
For me, one of our hardest experiences of creating a system was in Ajnamari, which was a language for vampires, for Peacock's The Vampire Academy. And we had decided that we would use a series of auxiliary verbs or helping verbs to create certain meanings with the verbs, like whether it was finished or ongoing or things like that. And creating the series of auxiliaries ended up just being incredibly difficult to be like, well, what is it going to look like when it's first person, second person, and so on. And so, like, it just took a lot of time. So that it was difficult to create, but not as, I guess, difficult to use on the flip side once you had the charts.
Yeah.
But then I think Wokutiji is the hardest for me to use, which is our language for mice. Just because we added in all of these little details that are marked on the language, and I absolutely forget, and I have to go back every single time and read like half the document to remember what gets marked where, to be able to translate something.
How many different languages for animals have you guys made? Because I'm really interested in like what animals you've picked to make a language for. Like I don't bears is bear. Go ahead.
So for our YouTube series, we're creating languages for little kind of kingdoms or communities of anthropomorphic animals who are a part of a board game that I'm making, kind of a battle board game where the little animals they fight, right? Um, they're very cute though, so it's kind of hard to make them fight. But yeah, so we've done one group per season. So first we did rabbits, then opossums, then mice, then cats, then dogs, then beavers, and we are currently working on our fox language.
And then as a side project, I actually did a language for squirrels that we may fit into this world at some point.
How much money do you make? Like, can this be a full time living in Hollywood in the broad sense of things at this point?
It's a career for us. It could theoretically be for another person. However, the opportunities not are not great. Like they're increasing, which is nice, but there will never be a huge demand simply because there are very few theoretical projects that would ever incorporate a created language. Like consider Sleepless in Seattle. You know, it's it's a fine movie. It's hard to imagine how a created language could have benefited that project, shall we say? You know, a lot of movies, a lot of television shows are simply about real life, people doing things in the real world. Those people are usually not language creators, so you couldn't even have it as like, oh, they're a language creator in the show, and so we're going to have some of the things they do, right? Most projects, and I would say most books, most movies, most plays, most TV shows, all across the entire world are done in one language and the language of that particular country or region, and that's it. Um, so because of that, there's never going to be a massive amount of opportunities. It's nice that the number of opportunities are increasing, that those that might use one are using one. That's great. But it's just never going to, I don't think it's ever going to reach a critical mass where it's like an entire industry with tons of different language creators, simply because most stories don't involve it at all.
When somebody comes to you with a budget, are we talking four figures, five figures, six figures?
We've had projects come to us with, you know, 3-digit budgets, and then, Marvel movies and everything in between.
Have you ever had somebody speak one of your languages to you? Like come up to you and speak it?
Yeah.
I'd be like,
That was
what?
the saddest yeah that you could
I
ever
know. I
have
thought
had.
like it came out like, oh, this is sensitive. I shouldn't ask anything else about it.
Sometimes I don't recognize it um, because I don't want to say they're not speaking it well, but they just don't say things the way that I would. Often, and I'm so embarrassed about this, but like I remember once, like I was doing a speaking gig, and there was like a cake because it was a big thing for undergraduate mixer. They made a cake and they put an inscription on it in High Valyrian, and I was like, well, those are certainly high Valyrian words. They're like, you know what it says? I'm like, I have no idea. This is not even close to being grammatical. I don't even know what you were trying to say. I don't remember what that word is at all. So it's like, I don't know.
But do people ever say to you Dracarys, right? Like that's the one that jumps out to me that like, oh, I know that one.
Oh, sure. I mean, I didn't make that word, but sure.
You didn't make it? Who made it?
George R. R. Martin.
Oh, he did? Boy, I didn't read those books very closely.
It's one of the 5 words of Valyrian he created.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, no. I did. Foot, mouth. Is there a difference when you look at it from a written versus a spoken perspective? Like, do you take your process completely differently if, like, this is only going to be written versus is only going to be spoken?
It's not that it's different, but obviously, if it's not going to be written, we don't create an orthography for it. So we don't, go through the process of actually creating a written form for it. We just have the spoken version. If it's going to be written, then we create original, unique orthographies for the system. And so, like for Ajnamari, for Vampire Academy, we had a writing system for that language. But then for the other language I had mentioned, Ménissier, for the witches, it was not written. So we never had a written form that we created for it. And so, yeah, so like when we create the writing systems, we create a whole writing system for it.
When you go to create these, is it better to have more technical knowledge or more creativity? Which direction does it seem to go?
You have to have both. Technical knowledge can be learned. Creativity can't, at least in my experience. Um, I don't know. It can be practiced, certainly, and kind of get in the habit of it, but there are some things that I feel like can't be taught. It's one of the reasons that I admired Jessie as a language creator so much. Her creativity was just off the charts. Um, when we started working together, it's because I was hiring somebody to work with me, and I looked at her work and was like, this is somebody who has it, you know. And at a certain point, like some of the technical things aren't as important because you can learn those, right? The creativity you can't. It's got to be there. So yeah, ideally it's both. Um, but in terms of like where the heart is, where the fun is, where the it factor is, that's the creativity, not the technical knowledge.
You know how the discussion forums are, right? You know how discussion forums are. Are there ever secrets to characters or the plot or etc. buried in the languages that you create?
I mean, sometimes, but usually nothing very big. There's a big theory going around in the Game of Thrones forums about Azor Ahai, which is this mythical figure that's gonna figures into the main prophecy of the thing, who's going to come and save things. They thought it was Jaime because Jaime, at one point in time in the show, he gets his hand cut off and his sword hand cut off, and it's replaced with a fixed golden hand, right? Um, and the word for hand is ondos in Valyrian, and the word for light, onyos. And so Azor Ahai is the Lord of Light, right? Um, and so there was this theory that embedded in the Valyrian language was this clue that Jaime was Azor Ahai, which I don't know, that might have been very clever, but it was completely and totally 100% unintentional and not intended at all. I created each of those words entirely separately for different reasons. They're both roots. I just came up with them at entirely separate times wasn't even thinking about it at the time. And so sometimes it's just ends up being further, not red herrings. I don't know, red herrings is the best thing. I was going to say not Easter eggs, but red herrings. And so that was kind of cool and fun, speculation for a bit, totally not intended. I can't think of a time where we've had some like really strong, like plot relevant, like clue that was in the language. Jess, can you?
I'm, if we have one, it is not coming to me in this moment.
That's pretty much all the questions that I got. Is kind of anything that we missed or what's coming up for you guys. I know you're working on stuff right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so much. And I don't even know. I'm staring at David through the screen here because it's so much of it is upcoming projects so that we can't talk about until it's released. And so there are like five of those that we're working on right now. And then David, I think we can talk about a few.
So part of the problem is when we're working on something that's brand new, you know? Like, so for example, it's not a super big secret that, we're working on the next season of House of the Dragon, the next season of The Witcher. Um, these are things that have been in production, and so it's not a surprise when we say that we're working on that, and so that'll be coming at some point. The other stuff that's like brand new and hasn't been released yet, that's the stuff that we really can't say anything about it. And even like the latest movie, I don't think there's been any kind of announcement that we've been working on it. That there's been no buildup at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And the studios, they're very touchy about this. They're like, we want people to be talking about this at this point in time and exactly at this point in time and not before and blah blah blah. Anyway, so yeah, suffice it to say, this summer will be the start of a very big year for us